recorded, feel free to just turn off your cameras. I would like to acknowledge that I am presenting today from the traditional and ancestral unceded territory of the Lekwungen people, now known as the Esquimalt and Songhees Nations, and of the Wasanich people. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat if you would like, and you can share the territory that you are joining in from as well today if you'd like. So a little bit about Farm to School BC. We are a provincial food education program administered by the Public Health Association of BC. We bring healthy, local, and sustainable food to the plates and minds of K-12 students across British Columbia. Since 2007, we've established ourselves as a trusted partner of BC schools, both funding and supporting their efforts to explore and promote food literacy and hands-on learning experiences. Our initiatives have empowered educators, engaged students, and strengthened school community connections. So a little bit about myself here. My name is Veronique Emmett. I am the Community Food Development Coordinator for Farm to School BC. My background is both in outdoor education as well as in regenerative organic agriculture, which really shaped the way that I approach hands-on learning around local food. So we want to say a thank you to everyone who helped make this resource possible. Special thanks to the Victoria Foundation for their financial contributions, and to all of the educators who helped review the development of this document during the creation stages. All right, so here we have a little review of what we'll be going through in the webinar today. As we walk through the resource, feel free to write any questions that you might have that come up in the chat box, and we'll return to them during the Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have questions as we go along, feel free to just pop them in there and we'll flag them, and then we can return to them at the end during the Q&A. All right, so now's our time to jump in. So this guide is designed to equip K-12 educators with planning considerations for engagement in food field trips, schoolyard activities, and in-school feasts. So you can think of Edible Adventures as a well-stocked garden shed for educators. It contains not just the seeds of activities and ideas, but also essential tools like planning checklists and curriculum connections as well. The resource supports both elementary and secondary educators, so there's resources and activities for both elementary and secondary students in there. And it really focuses on the hands-on learning aspect of food literacy and food learning. So it includes lots of different things that we'll dive into. We've got planning considerations, tips and checklists, resources and activities, and even ways to extend the learning back into the classroom. So we really wanted to highlight the value of hands-on food experiences. It really gives you the opportunity to build community, connect to the land, highlight local agriculture, and also an opportunity to showcase local producers and teach cross-curricular skills as well. So our goal here with this resource is to provide inspiration for these types of educational opportunities and also create some manageable steps for creating these experiences that are both memorable and, of course, tasty. All right, so the guide is divided into sort of three different categories. We have in the schoolyard, food field trips, and in-school feasts. And we'll kind of get into each one of those and what that might look like, but it kind of allows for a lot of different ways that you can incorporate these hands-on experiences into your lessons. So our first section is in the schoolyard. So you'll find this at the top, and it's really just to highlight that meaningful hands-on experiences don't always require really intricate arrangements or travels. You can use your existing resources that you have at the school, and it can be just as impactful of an experience. So a couple of these activities are something like seed bombs, like you can see these students making here, or nature scavenger hunts, like finding something in nature or in your school garden to represent all of the colors of the rainbow. And the way that we've sort of presented it in the guide is that there's lists of activities throughout all the various sections, and you can look for this little beat symbol throughout the guide, which will mark any of the activities that can also be done right in your schoolyard. So as we go through today, we'll have some of the examples of these activities, but in the guide, there's even more. And anytime you see that little beat, that's your sign that you can do this activity quite simply within your class hours right at school. So it's kind of like a bonus category within the guide. And then next up is another big category is our food field trips. So food field trips connect classroom learning to real world food systems, giving students hands-on experiences with local producers, plants, and animals. These visits deepen understanding of food security, sustainability, and the social and career aspects of food production. So it's really a hands-on way to be into the food system itself. And so a few activity examples that you can do there are tool tours on the farm, so learning about the tools that might be used, planting seeds, doing soil moisture trials. If you're lucky, maybe even an apiary and learning about some bees. Each category is broken down into different sections. And so within the food field trips, you'll find pre-trips things to consider, unique activities for elementary and secondary students. So as you can see here in this example, we have some elementary students or activities listed, sorry. And then you'll also find links to lesson plans, materials, and curriculum connections. So you'll have lists of activities that kind of connect back to curricular competencies and content. When you're planning your food field trips, it's really site dependent. Sometimes the site that you're going to might have a lot of activities to present to you, but sometimes it's nice to have a couple back pocket ones as well. So there's some in here that you can use. But kind of keeping that in mind as you connect with your host, depending on the time of year that you're going and what type of activities they do on the farm, will really shape and shift what you might be able to do. Also, I'm saying farm, but this could be kind of any kind of food producer. It doesn't necessarily have to be a farm. You can like really think outside the box on that one. A couple of tips and tricks that are listed here that are kind of nice to keep in mind. It's really nice to break up your day into stations. So if you have like 15 to 20-minute activities for the students to rotate through is really nice. And having someone manage the time and making sure that there's sort of one adult stationed at each activity. And then you can rotate throughout the day and have some kind of blocked before and after lunch is a really nice way to break it down and kind of be able to get kids right in there. So we'll zoom in here on this next one. So this is one example of a farm field trip activity that you can look at. So this is an elementary level activity. That said, I think it's a really great one for secondary students as well. You'll find here that the activity is linked to the lesson plan. So if you have the digital copy of the resource, you can click right onto where it says seed saving here, and that will take you to the lesson plan. And if you have the print copy, we also have them linked through QR codes, so that will also take you in there. This one links here to this lesson plan from our resources, this farm to school one here. But we also have resources lifted from some of our community partners. For example, there's some Farm Folk, City Folk seed saving resources right in here from tomatoes and cucumbers and kale and arugula. So each one is broken down in this way. And then you also have the curricular competencies and content listed in there too, so that can help you tie it back into your curriculum as you go along. And then we have our next big category, which is in-school feasts. So coming together around food is a really great way to have rich learning and community building. These feasts build empowerment, ownership, and celebration excitement around food. Shared meals really lead to cultural learning and stronger connections to peers, community, and local food systems. I think it's also important to note that these activities can be really simple, and it can be something like making potato wedges or kale chips from the food that you harvest in your school garden, or it can be really large scale. It can be a whole school harvest meal where you bring in local produce and invite guests, maybe have presentations. So you can like really be fall anywhere within that scale, and you can really get creative about the ways that you incorporate in-school feasts with your students. It's a really great way to get the students involved in the whole process so they can be there from brainstorming and creating the menu, sourcing, preparing the food, serving, enjoying, and celebrating with the food. Again, we've made a lot of curriculum connections throughout the resource for you to tie these back into your curriculum. And like I said, every feast will look so different depending on how many students you have, what your budget is, what kind of food you have available to you. Um, and so it really, this sort of serves as a guide and inspiration and will give you some activity ideas, but really the idea is to kind of give you space to sort of build this into what might work best for you. And we'll have some cool examples later of what that might look like. So again, what these activity guides within the in-school feast looks like, we have some pre-feast things to consider. So some planning considerations, unique activities for elementary and secondary students, and links to lesson plans and materials. And again, those curriculum connections, as well as in this section, you'll find some recipes and some meal planning resources too. So looking in here, we have a couple of these activities. Again, you've got that beat symbol in there to show you that these can be done kind of even just within your classroom or just outside in the schoolyard. So that we've got the Farm to School BC Taste the Rainbow activity, where you get to taste foods of different shapes and colors and sizes, as well as playing with food scraps. So learning about food waste and how to reuse it. So the example we have in this next one here um, is a secondary level activity. So this is a really great one that connects to First People's Principles, food studies and culinary arts, and applied design skills and technology. This is the traditional feast ceremony. So connecting with your Indigenous education department or local Indigenous knowledge keepers and elders to share protocol and tradition around food gatherings. Again, this can look like a lot of different things. This can be a whole school, or this could be maybe bringing someone into your classroom and introducing the students to a traditional food. So there's lots of flexibility within the activities that are listed in here as well. So those are kind of the main categories of these hands-on learning opportunities that we wanted to share and present and share some activities with. And so now we kind of jump into some of the planning resources. So these are all great and fun, but how do we make them happen? So if you have a lot of time, this is a great example of things to consider. And this is sort of a long-term planning calendar for, this is the field trip one, but there is one in the resource for school feasts as well. But this is to kind of give you an idea of like, okay, so we're starting at securing funding, we're looking at field trip locations, all the way to making our reservations for the bus and maybe planning a preliminary visit to the field trip site, and then to follow-ups at the end of the field trip after the field trip. So this is broken down sort of in a spring calendar, so starting in January for field trips in May, June. That said, fall is also a really good time for field trips, those seed saving activities. That's right now is a perfect time to do some of those. So keeping that in mind, the timeline might look a little bit different. So just something to keep in mind. But this is sort of to kind of help you keep on track and kind of give you some samples and examples of what are some of the things that might be important to consider during your planning stages of your field trip. So next up, we're kind of like zooming out of like, what are your field trip goals? So these are some prompts to help you get the most out of the experience. So to help shape your vision and help communicate when you're reaching out to your field trip hosts or your field trip locations. That said, this could also really be useful for planning a school feast as well. Just asking some of the questions around like, what are your goals for this field trip? What are you hoping your students will get out of it? just to kind of even help guide you as you're looking for somewhere to go, as you're looking for a field trip location. That might help answer some of those questions for you. And then zooming in even further, now looking at logistics, we have some questions to consider while you're planning your field trips around transportation, location, accessibility, safety. Farms are messy, they're busy, there's lots going on. Sometimes it can be a little bit dangerous. So these are nice questions to have. If you're working with a farm or a food producer that hosts a lot of things like this, they might have these answers already for you. But if it's somewhere that's like maybe a little bit more unfamiliar with what it might be like to have a bunch of students on site, these are really great questions to ask to make sure that they're prepared and that you're prepared as well. Like simple things like if there's access to running water to fill up their water bottles, so you can make sure that all the kids fill their water bottles up before they leave if they can't do it on site. Just little things like that to think about. And then finally comes the day of your field trip. Here's a sample schedule of what a field trip day might look like. Again, there's the same resource as well. There's a sample schedule for the school food celebration as well. So that would might look like a larger scale school food celebration if you've got a full day planning for it. Um, but then there's also the fillable schedule too. So these are samples of what that might look like. Some things to note in here, as I was mentioning earlier, it's really nice to have time for different stations to cycle students through, especially younger students, and kind of giving 15, 20 minutes around those stations, planning for a lunch break and maybe some time to do a tour, and then making sure you have lots of time to transport yourself to the site and back again at the end of the day. So again, this is an example. You can shape it however you like. And then there is that fillable schedule too. So as you're making your plans, you can kind of pop that information in there. And then finally in our planning resources, again, this is kind of some day of stuff of contact information to share with the host. And then a packing list as well, which again, you can adjust that based on the time of year that you're going, the weather, the activities. And also checking in with your host if there's anything specific that they think it's important to bring, or if there's anything you can support them by bringing, if they might need like smaller gloves for the students and you have some in the school garden or some small hand tools or that kind of thing as well. And then bringing it back again to those curriculum connections. So the activities offered in this guide provide a variety of ways for students to develop core competencies, as well as grade-specific curricular competencies and content connections as outlined in the BC curriculum. So these are some examples of big ideas for each subject and grade listed that can provide support and inspiration on connecting activities to curriculum-based learning. So as you saw previously in some of those activity examples, we've made some of those curriculum connections. But if you're planning some new activities or some different types of field trips or food feasts or something like that, these are kind of a bit of a more broader zoomed out examples of curriculum connections to some hands-on school food learning. And so you can kind of use this as a guide to sort of shape connecting it back to your curriculum. All right, so that's kind of the meat of the resource. And then of course, diving in there, you'll find tons more activities, tons more tips and things like that. But importantly, where can you find this? Well, we'll share it with you in a link right now, but if you're looking at it from our website, this is the front page of our website here, farmtoschoolbc.ca. If you drop down those teacher resources, you'll find Edible Adventures right there. It's just that second one, and that will take you to where you can download your resource. And just noting while we're here that a lot of our other resources can be found in here too. I'll mention a few of these later, but we also have a bunch of activities broken down by season here too. So it's kind of a nice landing page if you're looking for a few more resources as well. All right, so that's the bulk of the resource. I wanted to share a few stories with you today. So this kind of came out in conjunction with our pollinator awards, which were given out in the spring. 5 schools were nominated by their communities for the work that they do with food in their schools and received a $1,300 grant along with their award to host a local field trip or school food feast. So I'm going to share two of those stories with you real quickly, and then I'll pass it along to Eric from Stelly Secondary, who will share his experience with his students and what they did, and a little bit of the value that he sees in these experiences as well. So here we have Highland Park Elementary. Their divisions 13 and 14 received the 2025 Farm to School BC Pollinator Award. Students celebrated with a trip to Ridge Meadows Farm, exploring, feeding animals, and tasting fresh BC produce. They also enjoyed a pizza party at Maple Ridge Park, an outdoor picnic with other grade 1-2s, and a salad party using lettuce from their own school garden. These celebrations highlighted local food, community, and the school garden. And here we have Keaton Hill Elementary School Feast and Food Celebration. They hosted a full day celebration of learning through food, bringing together students, staff, families, and community partners. They had guest speakers, including Elder Charlie Joseph, district leaders, and Indigenous educators who emphasized land, culture, diversity, and community values. The feast was a collective effort with staff, parents, and students all preparing the dishes together. The menu reflected diversity of the school, included Indigenous foods like bannock and beef belly soup, Asian dishes, Western classics, salads, and desserts. The making of was supported by local producers and a red seal chef. The day really highlighted Peden Hill's values of respect, responsibility, ownership, cooperation, kindness, and safety, and celebrated community through food. So if you want to see more of these stories too, you can look at the Pollinator Award stories on our website as well. But for now, I will pass it along to Eric, who will tell you about his experiences.
Great, thanks, Veronique, and hello everyone, and thanks for taking the time to join on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon, whether it's prior to the Jays game or whatever it is. So I live in so-called Victoria for about 7 years now, and I have a huge privilege of working at a school called Stelly's. But it's where the school is 900 students, and it's just outside Victoria. And it's on the land of the Wasanich people, which is a really beautiful, rich, and resilient culture of 5 nations. And it's also in a very rich agricultural region. And so when I was offered this position, I was patient and observed and learned from colleagues and community, and slowly started to build, connections and community partnerships. And so what we have now is I sometimes call it a playground. It could be called, a food lab. But we have a commercial kitchen that's 48 years old, and every day we feed. I did about 400 hot entrees today, so 7 different choices. But we feed about 300 to 600 people every day, and we keep our prices at $5 and less. And I've for 2 years now been rescuing food, so the picture there of the table of all that produce, that's like a low average week of rescued food. And so what it allows is for us to really engage in food systems. And when I look at food education, I mean, I have this privilege of being in this commercial kitchen with, 24 youth, teenagers, but really I chose food education because I would argue that food is an engagement agent. This is an ableist term, but the learning is visible or tactile at least. It's also something that's highly adaptable. I would argue that food education is the epitome of differentiated instruction. So if we're making a salad, there's so many different tasks we can do. I'm learning through collaborating with groups like, Power to Be and others that there's really no limits to who and how and why people can be. I don't want to say in a kitchen, because really learning with and from food. So my teaching philosophy is teaching with and from youth, not to and at. And so that's what I get to do. And so when I think Megan O'Brien might be on here with our school district, SD63, but she nominated me for this, and I was very touched and humbled, but it was really nice because it allowed me to propel into making new friendships and partnerships. And so I'm involved in a number of different groups, coast to coast to coast, doing, food systems change and food literacy and all this. But it all comes down to, I would say, the relationship with youth, and we're talking like, K to 12 for sure, and the way that they can be their authentic selves and the way that they can really, like I sometimes say, get out of their head and into their hearts, and again, an ableist term, but their hands, like just a way to really experience what we do. And it's pretty powerful. And so when I won this or received this award of $1,300, I don't know. If someone said, "What would you do with $1,300 if you had to spend it on a feast and or a field trip?" I went a little like, I don't know, like I had so many ideas. And also again, I get to make food every day with you. So we did both. And so maybe we can jump the slide here, please and thanks. And no, this is about me. I talked about myself enough, but I do hope to keep in touch with any and all of you. I'll put my contact in, but yeah, please, reach out if you have any questions or if you have any barriers to doing food education or anything's a bit uncomfortable or nervous, or just to share ideas, that'd be fantastic. And so we'll go to the next one, please. And so our program, this will relate to what we chose to do. This document in the bottom right, Cooking in Two Worlds, I had the honor of having lunch with Jared Williams a few weeks ago at our Pro D, where our district gave me or us permission to feed 800 people with rescued food. And it's a huge part of our society, our world, and I would argue our land, and the one real system, which is our ecosystem. And so I tried to use this award to make that connection. So I invited Jared to come and hang out in our school and connect. So right now we have 105 students who identify as Indigenous, mostly from Wasanich Nation. In my class, about half my students are Wasanich youth, and they're really demonstrating resilience and thriving. But nonetheless, Jared was busy, as he is. And so I asked a neighbor, someone named Dan Hayes, and he's on this show called Moose Meat and Marmalade. And so our dogs play together. And so he was open to coming in. And so he came in, and I had 6 ducks that were donated from Take a Bite of BC, which is an awesome program I can tell you about another time. And so Dan brought in a cottontail rabbit and a Canada goose and 2 ducks. Yeah, maybe we'll go back. Sorry, I got off track. And so what was really awesome is that I'm working with 2 colleagues with 24 youth per class, but I was able to have like 8 students in him, and that just made one thing. And so they got to really get into it and get into the experience. And there was a little bit of shock about having wild game in the kitchen. And I've been vegan for a number of years now, and I'll butcher meat, etc. But it was really, he was the right person to talk about the ethics, but also our food system, and bringing up even as a white settler, like Indigenous politics. And so it was this really beautiful experience. And so they made this wonderful dish of blueberry reduction with some spiced eggplant, as well as duck breast and so forth. But Elder Carl Olson is an elder who comes to our school every Wednesday, and he's been protesting at Goldstream for 2 years. He's a wonderful man I learn a lot from. And so they didn't know each other. And so basically Dan catered for Elder Carl. And so we sold the food to the whole school, but those two had lunch together and made a connection. So even that in itself was really, really powerful. And so that experience was a way to make space to bring someone else into the kitchen to have him share his life story and his experience and what he does, to look at the idea of how to navigate the work of Jared Williams and others, such as Cooking in Two Worlds, as a non-Indigenous person, and not to check off something on a curriculum and not that, but to actually listen and learn and observe and do the work in a meaningful way. And I feel Dan did a really great job. And I asked a young man today who how it was, and he said, it was so life-changing to have this opportunity to hang out with him. And yeah. Okay, so now we'll go to the next one, because I'm probably running out of time. For a field trip, we were going to do a whole tour, because if you haven't been to this region, there's so so many amazing producers. And so Mitchell's Farms, the granddaughter of one of the main farmers who passed, a few years ago, Jenny Mitchell, she started this thing called Harvest Road a few years ago. And it's just like a little food truck. It's on site and they use Mitchell's, beef and some of their produce, but it is the epitome of like a local business featuring local products. So we're looking at, you know, um, the local, obviously like Phillips sodas, and they have culture kombucha, and then they're doing Berryman Farms for bacon, and they're even their veggie burgers made locally. But what I was able to do is, tap about 30 students on the shoulder and just be like, hey, I tell you you're awesome all the time. I always say, I wish I could feed you instead of you feeding the school because you work so hard and you just put your heart into this. What are you doing on June? I think it was 18th. And so these students and a few colleagues, and actually invited a bunch of like, different EAs in our school and many people. We went down to Mitchell's Farms. We got a brief little tour of the farm area. And then we had a really just this really authentic and just social experience of just enjoying this great food. And Jenny talked to them about the reality of being like growing up in farming, and then what to do with that to the next stage for her own career, and the busyness of it, but also the opportunity. And so it was a really nice way to close the year. And what I thought was cool, that I teach kids in I work with youth grades 9 to 12, is that I don't feel hierarchies based on gender, orientation, or background, or age, or each of them get to really find their own connection. And that's what was really beautiful about a day like this, is that money allowed me to come to bring them down there and make these connections with the local place, but also to allow them to see that like an all-star crew wasn't maybe who they would expect it is, but everyone in their own authentic way got to do that. So just to finish up here, and feel free, Veronique or Madison, tell me if we're done. These are some things, that the opportunity gave me, and I just blurted this out recently, but local supporting locals. So we're talking about food sovereignty and Canadian, so-called Canadian food sovereignty and local food. But when you really do local, like when I'm biking to work and I stop at Mitchell's Farms and I ask Terry, like, hey, do you have any Brussels sprouts? And I literally buy it from my bicycle and bike it up the hill and make, like a dish. It's just a really fun way to live. The process of choosing, it wasn't stressful. It was really fun, and it allowed me to kind of reveal some people and farmers and practitioners I didn't know about. Relationships, those of us that are educators here, it's the relationship business. It's all about the relationship. And I would argue at the pace of the youth, not the pace of myself, at least. And so these experiences allowed that. And really corny words here, pollinated new connections, journeys, but it did. I got to know a lot of people through this. And that's what I think you each will notice, is that if you take that little step out of comfort zone maybe, and introduce yourself and meet someone and bring youth, it's often a win-win-win, especially around food. And then it allowed me to give back and thank folks, and that's a big part, like whether it's working with youth or with colleagues in a school. That was really great. And then I think obviously I've spoken about it, brought people together. And so that's there might be one more thank you slide, I can't recall, pardon if there isn't. But what I've really want to sum up is that every year I go to Butchart Gardens. It wasn't really my place. But Travis Hansen, who runs the whole food and bev department stuff, he and I became friends. And so I've gone, twice a year we go. And what is so amazing is that the entire chef team staff, they welcome us in. And these youth and I, we walk through the underbelly of the restaurants and the kitchens, and they really take an honor in sharing their journeys. And what is so cool is that it's not, they don't have a script, they're authentic. And I think the youth can really feel that. And I think that's what happens when you do some kind of food education experience, is that there's a mentor of mine named Mustafa Coach. He's at Toronto Metropolitan University. He says when you eat food, you ingest like the earth, and but really, like, it really connects us to the land. It connects us to people we share. And I'm really grateful to Farm to School BC for what I received as an opportunity. And I think it's amazing, this webinar, and to share with other people that, the last thing I'll say is that I think a lot of food education requires unlearning. In my opinion, it's not about being a chef or a food studies teacher. Obviously, these things are great, but it's really realizing that food education isn't just a life skill, in my opinion. And also, not only food educators can do food education. It's something that's accessible, as simple as, like, picking an apple from a local tree and just talking about eating it. But it's something I really encourage each of you to to get into. And please, I'll put my contact here in a second, and reach out with any questions. And thanks again for letting me share some of what I get to do. Yeah, here at in the land of the Saanich people.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eric. It's really great to hear about those experiences, and also, yeah, hearing about how you bring those students into the agricultural community. Um, yeah, it's really special that they get to have those experiences. So very much appreciate that. So we have a bit of time now for some questions. So feel free, these can be questions about the resource itself. If you have questions specifically about planning these things, we can help answer those. If you have some specific questions for Eric too, we've got a few minutes here that we can kind of jump into some questions. I'll just look through the chat. I think I saw at least one in there. Just wondering if there's any support for liability policies on farms or site, etc. So I can speak to that as a farmer who has hosted field trips on my farm. My liability insurance covers on-site visitors. So most likely the farms that you're going to always ask them for a copy of their insurance. I'll say that no one's ever asked me, but I do have the coverage. But yeah, most farms liability insurance should cover the fact that there are folks coming on site. If that answers your question.
Can I ask my question out loud? Is it for
Yeah.
Veronique? Veronique?
Veronique, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I used to be a Farm to School BC animator. Hi. Yeah, I guess I just asked the question because depending on the farm, some don't have that kind of coverage of like liability. And so I'm just wondering what the right way to ask that question is without being like rude or judgmental. I just wonder if there's a way to include that in some of your educational material, like, tips on how to ask those questions. Because I know there's a certain liability that covers the kids because of the field trip, but I do know there's a lot of high risk situations on farms, even though we might not think so. Getting stepped on by a cow, like tripping on a tractor, like those things happen. So like, I'm just wondering if there's ways to feel supported in this document with like that kind of question asking, because it can kind of be uncomfortable, I think, in like my personal opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I understand what you mean. Yeah, I think like approaching it from like a safety standpoint, I think it's valid to be asking questions to ensure that like you have the safety of your students and everything accounted for. Um, yes, that's a really good question. I don't think it's necessarily something that we addressed within this specifically. Like we did kind of frame some of the questions around like safety and accessibility concerns just to make sure that you have those answers questions. But in terms of liability, I wonder too if like it's possible to get like they might be able to just get like a special events permit liability, like you can get liability insurance for special events, so it might be something like that as like a day of thing instead of like changing their whole liability insurance. And so
sometimes those things cost
money,
money, so I guess it'd be a curious like thing of like, could the people on the field trip offer the money to cover that, because those do cost money. And so farms often are like excited to share their passion, but often if they have to like fork over $300 for like a certain license for the day, that might dissuade them. So I'm just curious if that's like been addressed.
Yeah, that's a good question. Eric, did you have something to say about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I can't directly answer it, but what it brings up for me is we talk about connections and relationships. Like, I taught, foods in Surrey and had the most amazing time doing that till I moved to the island. But maybe because I get to feed a lot of people in our district, but I've learned that a lot of the relationships, connections are with our districts. And so whether that's, literally up to trustees, assistant superintendents, you know, different jobs and placements where they're not necessarily in the schools often, you're not meeting them, and just connecting with them and asking questions like that. We're like, what is this? Because maybe it's something that hasn't been dealt with yet. And then you can share with colleagues and share with others. Because I've developed this mentality of like, not yet. Because before I had that mentality, I was like, oh yeah, maybe I won't go to farm. That's true. Something bad could happen. And so like I compost in our school, like whatever, for like 98% of stuff, but it was always one bin once a month and it would overflow. And then we get pests and it was like, you can't do it. So I developed this not yet, and I would do 3 bins a week. And so I do feel that when you know, like that question is so good. And I would say if anybody has that and it's like, yeah, maybe we can't do it, then instead just be like, not yet. Let's actually find someone to help support this because it could be really expensive if it's something that's not valued or prioritized. And I think that's where, you know, today can really showcase is that
Totally.
this is not a cool thing to do. Our food system is such an important thing for youth to learn with and from that. Yeah. So thanks for bringing
And
that.
I know there's like grants too, and I wonder if there could be a grant to say like we're covering the liability so we can have an amazing field trip. And I guess I am not actively teaching. I'm doing an art degree at the moment for fun, but I just know like we never think the accident will happen, but then the day the accident happens, you've really like kind of screwed over the next people for their potential to do it. And so not that I'm saying you're gonna trip on a tractor, but like I just think it's important to cover your bases, especially associated with Farm to School BC. Like they're just such an amazing group, and it would just be sad. It's like, oh, we got this grant, and then a kid fell on a tractor and the pitchfork went in his belly. You know, like you never know, and that would just be sad. So I wonder if there's also a way to incorporate like a grant with Farm to School where it's like, here's $500 to like help you have a successful field trip on top of your trip. Like I guess I'm just thinking of these little nuanced ways. And yes, Eric, I hear you. Like if the school district relation is positive, I think it's so much easier to approach it. I worked in Kamloops and I struggled to have relations with our school district. And so I just need to do it on my own and just like do it without asking. But I would prefer to have the liability covered, even if the district, especially if the district doesn't like me, because then there's more reasons to say no to food field trips if like a kid gets a pitchfork in their belly. Anyway, sorry, that's my little ramble. But yeah, I think it's totally manageable.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think, yeah, I think it's, yeah, definitely something like an important thing for us to consider too if we're like doing um grants for field trips in the future to like maybe that's an important line item of making sure that there is insurance coverage and that we can help support that if that's a possibility. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that to our attention. Does anyone else have any questions before we move on to the next thing? We're almost at the end here. I'll also just, I think Megan had a response in there too as well, said, I've also had success with adding on a list of those extra risks and considerations that are more farm specific as part of the permission slip, as an option as well. Obviously it can't be comprehensive, but as an option to kind of give a little bit more. Okay. All right, so I'll move on to our last couple slides here. We have another very exciting resource that we'll be launching later this month. Cultivating Curiosity is a resource designed for secondary educators to enhance agriculture education in BC. It offers guidance on integrating agricultural concepts into the curriculum and developing board authorized courses, I have to say that slowly, and exploring school-based agriculture programs across the province. The resource includes seasonal inquiry-based activities aligned with farm cycles and connects educators to post-secondary and dual credit pathways, complementing a webinar series with program leads. Cultivating Curiosity helps teachers link classroom learning with real-world food systems and inspires the development of sustainable hands-on programs. So this resource launch will be on October 28th from 3:30 to 4:30. We can send you the link in the chat to register. You can register through our website as well. But it's a really exciting resource where we've done case studies on 3 different schools offering the
Vera, I think we're losing
authority
you.
authorized courses, and just a really cool way to learn about how you can include agriculture
Vera, I think you're freezing up here at the end.
Into your classroom. Can you hear me okay?
We lost you for a bit. I think you may be back now.
Sorry about that. My internet just kicked me right off. Let me just share that page right back. We're literally at the last line.
Make it to the finish line.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. So I was just saying that these are a few more resources that you can find on our website. And then kind of under that same teacher resource tab where you'll find the edible adventures. And then finally, we just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day for being here. We're really excited to share this resource with you. We're really proud of it. So thank you for coming along and learning about it. You can download it again from our website. You can follow us on social media, and through our website you can also sign up for our newsletters. So if you want any dates from us, we don't send out a whole lot, but when we do, they're usually pretty juicy. So I recommend signing up if you're not already. Thank you again to Eric for sharing your knowledge and your experiences with us. We really appreciate getting to hear experiences with us. We'd love to hear about it. So thank you so much and have a great rest of your evening.